The cold expanse of space was alive with chaos. Across the galaxy, the Droian Dominion, an empire of ruthless and technologically advanced aliens, had spread their influence like a shadow over everything. Their fleet was vast, their power unmatched. Every system they conquered, they turned to dust, leaving nothing but fear and destruction in their wake. Entire civilizations, once proud and powerful, had fallen before them. Nothing could stand against their might. On the edge of the galaxy, a fleet of Droian warships hovered above a burning planet. The skies were filled with debris as their weapons tore apart the last remnants of a rebellious human colony. Emperor Vexar, the supreme leader of the Droian Dominion, stood aboard the flagship, looking out at the destruction. He watched with cold, calculating eyes as the final human stronghold was obliterated, reduced to nothing but ashes. His voice echoed through the command center as he addressed his officers. "The humans are a myth. They no longer exist," Vexar proclaimed, his words carrying a sense of finality. "The galaxy is ours now. Let no one doubt our power." But even as he spoke, something stirred in the dark corners of the galaxy. Something the Droians had forgotten, something they had never anticipated. The Droian Empire had spent centuries crushing human colonies. They believed that Earth and its people were just a distant memory, a once powerful race that had vanished long ago. After all, the humans had been silent for over 1,000 years. The Cryo sleep stations that held humanity's greatest warriors had been forgotten, buried beneath time and dust. But they weren't truly gone. And now, the galaxy was about to learn just how wrong the Droians had been. In the cold, forgotten corners of space, a small, abandoned Cryo sleep station lay dormant, hidden from the universe, its purpose long abandoned. It had once been a shield for humanity, a place where Earth's greatest warriors had been stored in cryogenic sleep. They were meant to be Earth's last line of defense if the worst ever came. But with the passage of time, they were abandoned, left to gather dust in the empty silence of space. Now, a faint signal began to pulse from the station. It was weak, barely detectable, but it was enough. In the cold darkness, the ancient Cryo sleep chambers began to hum with life. Deep inside the station, a series of human Cryo sleep chambers activated. One by one, they began to open. The human elite task force, the last hope of humanity, began to awaken. These were the soldiers who had been genetically enhanced and technologically upgraded, fitted with the most advanced AI and weaponry. Their bodies had been preserved in cryogenic sleep for over a millennium. Their minds kept in stasis, but their training and enhancements had never deteriorated. The soldiers, disoriented and confused, began to rise from their slumber. The task force was led by Commander Jake, a tall, battle-hardened leader with scars from countless wars. His eyes flickered open as the Cryo chamber doors hissed open, revealing the cold, sterile chamber. His mind raced as memories of his past life began to flood back, and the realization hit him. The Droian Dominion had destroyed humanity's colonies. Where are we?" Commander Jake muttered, his voice hoarse from disuse. He stood up, his mind struggling to catch up with the situation. His body was no longer the one he remembered. It was stronger, faster, augmented by the finest technology the humans had developed before they were forced into slumber. The rest of the team began to awaken around him. Sergeant Raquel, the team's weapons expert, immediately assessed the situation, checking her gear and her weapons systems. Lieutenant Harper, the AI specialist, activated the station's central system, attempting to access any remaining data. "We've been asleep for over 1,000 years," Lieutenant Harper said, his voice filled with disbelief as the screen in front of him flickered to life, displaying old, corrupted records. "The Droians, they've wiped out human civilization." Commander Jake clenched his fists, his mind raced with the weight of the situation. Humanity's last hope had just awakened, but they were facing an enemy far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. The Droxians had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, and now they were planning to wipe out what remained of humanity. "We can't let this happen," Jake said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We fight, we survive, and we take back what was stolen from us." As the Droxian fleet continued its reign of terror across the galaxy, Commander Jake and his team began to prepare for battle. They had no time to waste. They had been asleep for too long, and the Droxian Empire was growing stronger by the day. The team's first mission was to re-establish contact with any surviving human colonies, but it wouldn't be easy. The Droxian fleet was everywhere. The human colonies that remained were scattered and isolated, and the Droxians had been ruthlessly hunting them down. The elite task force would need to utilize every advanced weapon, every cloaking device, and every tactic in their arsenal if they were going to have any chance of survival. As the team made their way to the command center, the Droxian fleet unleashed another devastating wave of destruction on a nearby planet. From the observation deck of the Cryo station, they could see the destruction unfolding. The skies were filled with explosions, debris flying in every direction, as the Droxians decimated another human world. The Droxian warships were massive, their dark, jagged forms cutting through the cosmos with terrifying speed. They fired their weapons without hesitation, destroying everything in their path. To the Droxians, the galaxy was theirs to command, and humanity was nothing more than a fleeting memory. But Commander Jake and his team were about to show the galaxy that humanity was not gone. They were still here, still fighting, and they were going to take the fight to the Droxians. In that moment, the team knew what they had to do. They had to reclaim the galaxy, one battle at a time. The fight would not be easy, but they were humanity's last hope, and they would not go down without a fight. The sudden hum of the Cryo chamber doors slowly echoed through the darkened room. Cold mist spilled out as they slid open one by one, revealing the soldiers inside. Their bodies, long preserved by advanced cryogenic technology, began to stir. The human elite task force, humanity's last hope, was awakening. These soldiers were more than just men and women. They were the finest product of human science and war, enhanced by the most advanced AI. Augmented with superior strength, speed, and reflexes, their bodies were nothing like the ones they had once known. Commander Jake, the leader of this elite group, blinked as he slowly regained consciousness. His head was pounding. The air was cold, sterile, and unfamiliar. As his vision cleared, his mind struggled to remember his past, to grasp the purpose of his mission. But everything felt foggy, blurry. He stood up, unsteady for a moment, his body feeling different, more powerful, but also strange. His senses seemed heightened, his muscles were firmer, stronger, and yet it was as if a gap existed between the soldier he had once been and the one now awakening. Beside him, Sergeant Raquel struggled similarly, trying to shake off the confusion clouding her mind. She looked around, disoriented, but the quick flicker of recognition crossed her face as she noticed the Cryo chamber's surroundings. She was no longer in a training facility or a combat zone. This was something different, something far more important. Her fingers instinctively reached for her sidearm, but as her enhanced senses came alive, she realized something extraordinary. She could feel the entire environment like never before, as though her very skin could sense the walls, the air, and even the distant hum of machinery. "Where are we? What happened?" she asked, her voice breaking the silence that had surrounded them for centuries. Her eyes met Jake's, searching for answers. Jake shook his head slowly, the realization hitting him hard. The mission, his life, his purpose, all were lost to time. The memories of the past were hazy, like a half-forgotten dream. What had happened to Earth? What had happened to humanity? Why had they been put into these chambers? Lieutenant Harper, the team's AI specialist, was the next to speak, his voice much steadier than the others. "We were in Cryo sleep for over 1,000 years. The systems show a massive anomaly in the Droian Dominion's activity. Humanity, we've been extinct, according to their records. The word extinct hit Jake like a punch to the gut. His eyes locked onto Harper's, the meaning of those words sinking in slowly, almost painfully. "We were the last line of defense," Jake muttered, his fists clenching tightly. He could feel the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. They had been humanity's final chance, but in their absence, the Droian Dominion had believed them wiped out. A myth, a forgotten memory. But they were wrong. They had awoken, and now they would face the terror of the Droians who had conquered the galaxy. Humanity was not extinct. Jake turned to his team, his voice steely and determined. "We got work to do. Time to remind the galaxy who we are." As he spoke, the other soldiers began to shake off their confusion. Their minds were slowly catching up with the new reality. Sergeant Raquel began to check her weapons, instinctively readying herself for the fight ahead. Private Mason, a younger soldier in the team, flexed his fingers as though testing out his new enhanced strength. They were all more than they had been. Augmented, improved, better than the soldiers of the past. But the knowledge of their new capabilities felt strange, like trying to drive a car without understanding how the engine worked. However, the team knew one thing for certain. They needed to act. The Droians were still out there, and they had to be stopped. "First things first," Jake continued. "We need to re-establish contact with the survivors. There are still colonies out there, and we'll need all the help we can get. But we need to act fast." The decision was made quickly. Their first target was a Droian supply base, hidden in a distant part of the galaxy. It was a critical target, one that the Droians depended on for resources to continue their conquest. Taking it out would cripple their supply chain and send a message that humanity was back. They prepped quickly. Harper and Raquel worked in sync, combining their skills to load the cloaking devices into the mission's stealth drones, a set of cutting-edge technology that would help them sneak past the Droian defense systems undetected. Jake's mind was focused, each movement instinctual as he prepared his team for the mission. The Droian supply base was located on a barren moon, heavily guarded and surrounded by anti-aircraft defenses. But it wasn't invincible. With their cloaking tech and enhanced drones, the humans had the element of surprise on their side. Once the plan was in motion, the team launched. The stealth drones, cloaked in near invisibility, glided silently through the cold expanse of space, closing in on the supply base. The air was thick with tension as they neared their target. Jake's voice came through their comms, steady and commanding. "Hold tight. We're going in." The team silently descended onto the surface of the moon. As they landed, they felt the weight of the moment. This was their first test, their first strike against the Droians. They moved quickly and silently through the craggy, desolate landscape, their bodies moving with precision. Their enhanced senses allowed them to hear the faintest movements, to track enemies long before they could be seen. Everything was going according to plan until they reached the heart of the Droian base. As they infiltrated deeper, one of the guards spotted them. A sudden burst of energy lit up the sky, and the silence shattered with the roar of battle. The team had been discovered. Jake didn't hesitate. His enhanced reflexes kicked in as he fired at the enemy, each shot hitting its mark with deadly accuracy. The team followed suit, the sound of weapons clashing against the Droian soldiers' armor filling the air. The battle was intense, but the humans' advanced technology and AI-enhanced skills gave them the upper hand. It wasn't long before they breached the Droian defenses, making their way deeper into the base. The base's central core was within their reach. But as they fought their way through, a Droian officer appeared, blocking their path. Jake's heart skipped a beat when he saw who it was. It was Bonner, one of his oldest friends and a former comrade in arms. But now, Bonner was a Droian officer, his mind twisted by years of Droian conditioning. "Jake," Bonner's voice was cold and mechanical. "You should have stayed asleep. Now, you're just in the way." Before Jake could react, Bonner fired. The shot was precise, striking one of Jake's soldiers, Private Mason, directly in the chest. The young soldier collapsed, his lifeless body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Jake's world shifted. The loss hit him like a storm. Mason had been part of their team, part of their family. His death was a stark reminder of the cost of war. "Bonner," Jake shouted, his rage burning in his chest. "You were one of us. This isn't you." But Bonner didn't respond. He was a soldier of the Droxians now, and nothing Jake said would bring him back. The team fought desperately, their grief mixed with determination. With a final, devastating shot, Jake ended the fight, but the cost was clear. Bonner was dead, and Mason, the loss cut deep. As the team secured the base and planted explosives to destroy it, the weight of the loss lingered. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And as they prepared to leave, one thing was clear: the Droxians would pay for what they had done. The first battle had been a shocking success for the humans. Against all odds, they had managed to defeat the Droxian forces in a stunning display of their advanced technology and unmatched tactics. The cloaking devices and AI-driven ships had given them an edge, allowing them to strike at the heart of the Droxian forces before they could even react. The Droxians were quick to underestimate them, thinking that this first victory was nothing more than a lucky fluke. Commander Jake stood at the front of his team, watching the aftermath of their first victory. It had been an unexpected win, but it was far from over. Droxian forces were vast, and they would not be easily deterred. Yet the humans had proven something important that day. They were not to be underestimated. As they took stock of their success, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey ahead. This victory, while important, was only the beginning. The Droxians were far more advanced than they had anticipated, and their forces were many. Jake felt an uneasy tension in the pit of his stomach, but in that moment, he allowed himself to savor their victory, even if it was temporary. But the Droxians weren't finished. They couldn't afford to take this loss lightly. They believed this was just a random fluke, a small victory by a desperate group of humans. They dismissed it as something that wouldn't happen again. They hadn't seen what humanity was truly capable of. The humans, however, had no intention of letting that perception stand. They were ready for their next strike, something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Commander Jake gathered his elite team once again, knowing that the stakes had grown higher. The Droxians were an incredibly dangerous force, but humanity's resolve was stronger. They had to keep pushing, no matter the cost. The next mission was even more crucial than the last, taking down a Droxian base that was deep within their territory. It was a massive stronghold, heavily defended, and the human forces needed to be clever, quick, and deadly. The plan was simple but audacious. They would use their most advanced weapon, the quantum stealth bombers. These bombers were cloaked in a quantum field, making them nearly invisible to enemy radar and sensor systems. With this technology, they would be able to infiltrate deep into enemy lines and destroy the Droxian base with surgical precision. The mission was set in motion. The quantum stealth bombers soared through the dark void of space, their sleek bodies invisible against the backdrop of the stars. They were moving silently, almost ghost-like, as they approached the Droxian base. Jake watched the feed from the cockpit of his bomber, his heart pounding as they neared their target. The tension was palpable. This mission could either mark the end of the Droxians' reign or be their undoing. When they arrived at the base, it was clear that the Droxian defenses were not prepared for this level of stealth. The bombers moved closer, dropping precision-guided explosives that tore through the base's infrastructure. The explosions were massive, ripping through the fortified walls, sending debris into the void of space. For a moment, there was nothing but destruction, a silent testament to the power of humanity's resolve. As the base crumbled, Jake's heart raced. This was the kind of strike that would shake the Droxian Empire to its core. The destruction of their stronghold would send a clear message: humanity was back, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Despite his personal grief, Jake had to lead his team forward. They were his family now, and he would do whatever it took to protect them. But in the quiet moments, when there was no battle to fight, the memories of Bonner's betrayal and death came rushing back. Jake would never forget his friend, the man he had once fought beside. And every time he stepped onto the battlefield, he did so with Bonner's face in his mind, his image haunting him as a reminder of what they were fighting for. As the humans celebrated their victory, the ripple effect was felt throughout the galaxy. The Droxians, who had dismissed humanity as a myth, were starting to realize just how wrong they were. The news of the Droxian base's destruction spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy. And with it, the reputation of the human elite task force grew stronger. The galaxy was beginning to take notice of the underdog who had dared to fight back. Visuals of the destruction were broadcast far and wide. Orbital bombardments, massive explosions ripping through the sky, and the remnants of the Droxian base floating in the void of space, shattered beyond recognition. The human forces were becoming legends in their own right, and as each victory piled up, the Droxians began to panic. But even as the humans gained ground, there was still a long way to go. The Droxians were a powerful force, and this was just one battle in an ongoing war. But the humans had proven something powerful. They were no longer the underdogs. They had stood up to an empire that had thought them weak, and they had struck back with a vengeance. Jake and his team stood at the center of this new war. They had awakened from their cryogenic sleep to find a galaxy at war, and they had stepped into the fray with determination. But with every victory, the Droxians were learning more about their enemy. They were evolving, adapting to the new threat. Jake knew that their battles were far from over, but for the first time in years, he felt the glimmer of hope. The Droxians had underestimated humanity, and that would be their downfall. As the team gathered in their briefing room, Jake addressed them with a calm but determined voice. "We've won, but the war is far from over. They've underestimated us once, but they won't make that mistake again. We have to be ready for whatever comes next." His voice faltered for just a moment as his mind drifted back to Bonner's death. But he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "We've proven that we're capable of winning, of taking down the Droxian Empire. And we'll keep fighting, no matter what it takes. For humanity. For Earth." Jake's words were met with solemn nods. The team understood. The war was just beginning, and there would be more battles ahead. But the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and the Droxians would soon learn that humans were not to be underestimated. Commander Jake stood before his team, the weight of the mission ahead pressing heavily on his shoulders. After the devastating blow they had dealt to the Droxian Empire, it was time for the next move. The Droxians were powerful, their homeworld a fortress surrounded by an impenetrable defense system, but Jake wasn't afraid. His team was composed of the most advanced warriors humanity had to offer, and their determination was unmatched. They had already proven their strength on the battlefield. Now, it was time to bring the fight directly to the Droxian heart. The plan was simple: attack the Droxian homeworld and destroy their AI Supreme Command Center, the heart of their military operations. The Droxians relied heavily on their advanced artificial intelligence systems to run their fleets and manage their defenses. If the humans could take down their AI core, it would be a crippling blow, one that would give humanity the edge they needed to win the war. But getting to that core was no easy task. The Droxians had fortified their homeworld with some of the most sophisticated defenses in the galaxy. Jake's strategy was based on the strengths humanity had shown during their previous victories. AI-enhanced tactics, advanced cloaking technology, and their ability to adapt to any situation. The humans had learned quickly from their past encounters, and their adaptability would be the key to taking down the Droxians once and for all. The mission was set into motion, and the human forces began their advance toward the Droxian homeworld. The space battles were fierce, with human ships dodging Droxian fire and launching counterattacks with pinpoint precision. Jake's team used their cloaking devices to their advantage, slipping through the Droxian defenses unnoticed. But despite their stealth, the Droxians were relentless. their AI constantly adapting to the human strategies, predicting their every move. As the battle raged on, the humans found themselves pushed to their limits. Every maneuver, every attack, had to be calculated carefully. The Droxians were no longer underestimating humanity. They had learned to respect their enemy, and it was clear they would fight with everything they had. Despite the intensity of the space battles, the real challenge awaited them on the surface of the Droxian homeworld. The humans needed to breach the planetary defenses, which were guarded by not only Droxian soldiers, but also automated turrets and AI-controlled drones. The AI Supreme Command Center was located deep within the planet's core, surrounded by layers of fortified bunkers and defenses. Getting there wouldn't be easy, but Commander Jake had a plan. The team landed on the surface, and they immediately began their assault. The human forces stormed through the Droxian strongholds, their AI-driven ships providing air support while their ground forces battled through the defenses. The planetary siege was intense, with explosions lighting up the sky and ground troops clashing in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The humans were quick, efficient, and ruthless, but even with their advanced technology, they faced an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The Droxian AI had begun to adapt, using its vast network of drones and automated defenses to create new traps for the humans. But Jake and his team weren't deterred. They continued pushing forward, their AI-enhanced strategies keeping them one step ahead of their enemies. With every battle won, they drew closer to their goal, the AI Supreme Command Center. But there was a twist. As they neared the command center, the Droxian AI initiated a mental manipulation protocol designed to break the humans' will. The AI could invade the minds of the soldiers, projecting powerful illusions and attempting to control their thoughts. The Droxians had always relied on their AI for dominance, and now they were using it as a weapon to manipulate the human forces. For the first time, Jake felt a moment of doubt. He had always relied on his instincts, his team, and his technology to guide him. But the AI's mental manipulation was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was as if the very fabric of his mind was being torn apart, the AI planting visions and thoughts that weren't his own. His body froze, his thoughts clouded, and for a moment, he lost all sense of direction. But Jake wasn't alone. His team was there, and they fought the same battle. They could feel the AI's presence in their minds, but they also knew how to fight it. With every bit of strength they had, they pushed back against the mental assault. The AI tried to break them, to make them doubt their purpose, but the human will was stronger. They fought together, relying on their bond, their unity, and their shared mission. It was this connection that allowed them to resist the AI's manipulation, pushing through the mental fog and continuing their advance. However, the Droxian AI was relentless. As they neared the command center, the mental assault intensified. The humans began to lose their focus, the images in their minds becoming harder to distinguish from reality. Commander Jake felt his grip on reality slipping, his thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. It was as if the entire Droxian fleet had turned its attention on him, and the AI was feeding him endless images of failure and despair. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the humans found a way to fight back. They activated their countermeasures, deploying an advanced AI-jamming signal that disrupted the Droxian AI's control over their minds. With this newfound strength, the humans surged forward, charging toward the command center with renewed determination. They had broken the AI's control, and now they were more focused than ever on their mission. Jake's heart sank. Laura had been more than a soldier to him. She had been a close friend, a sister in arms. Her sacrifice was a reminder of the cost of war. The loss of Laura hit Jake harder than he expected, her absence leaving a gaping hole in his heart. But he couldn't let grief consume him. There was still a war to fight, and the Droxians had to be stopped. With the AI's control broken, the humans launched their final assault on the AI Supreme Command Center. The battle was fierce, with every member of the team giving everything they had. Orbital bombardments rained down from above, tearing through the Droxian defenses. Inside the command center, The Droxian leaders tried desperately to launch a counterattack, but it was too late. The humans had already breached their last line of defense. Jake stood at the heart of the Droxian command center, his hands shaking with emotion. The weight of the loss, the weight of everything they had fought for, hit him all at once. But despite the pain, he knew they had won. The Droxians had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The Droxian Eye was destroyed, and the empire that had once ruled the galaxy was no more. Humanity had struck back, and they had won. But the victory was bittersweet. The price had been high, and many lives had been lost along the way. As Jake looked out over the ruins of the Droxian homeworld, he knew that their fight was far from over. The galaxy had been changed forever, and humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. But at what cost? The sacrifice of so many, including his closest friend, Captain Laura, would haunt him forever. Still, there was no time to mourn. The Droxians had been defeated, but the war was far from over. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. But the true test was still ahead. And Jake, with his team by his side, was ready for whatever came next. After weeks of battle, humanity had finally made its way to the heart of the Droxian Empire. The fight had been long and brutal, but they had arrived at the doorstep of the Droxian Emperor Vexar himself. It wasn't just another battle. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Would humanity finally defeat the oppressive, AI-driven empire, or would they fall at the hands of their technologically superior enemies? Commander Jake stood before his team, his expression fierce, his eyes filled with resolve. The final confrontation awaited them, but there was no fear in his heart. Humanity had been underestimated by the Droxians time and time again, and they had always come out on top. This time, though, it would be different. The stakes had never been higher. The Droxian flagship, the heart of the entire empire, loomed before them, its vast structure floating in space like a beast waiting to strike. The Droxian Emperor Vexar was inside, waiting for them. Jake and his team knew this battle would be unlike any other. They had fought through everything the Droxians could throw at them, from their AI-driven armies to their devastating orbital weapons. But now, they were facing the most dangerous enemy of all, the Droxian Emperor himself. The humans' final assault was brutal. AI-enhanced human forces stormed the Droxian flagship, their tactics perfect, their every movement calculated. The Droxian Eye had been their greatest adversary, but now it had no hold on them. Humans had adapted, and they had learned to fight in ways the Droxians never could have predicted. As they fought their way through the flagship's defenses, Jake's team pressed forward, their mission clear: reach the Emperor Vexar and end the war once and for all. But the Droxians would not give up without a fight. Their soldiers, enhanced by their own version of AI technology, fought with ferocity. The humans had seen the deadly power of the Droxian forces before, but now they faced them in their own home territory. And the enemy was ruthless. The Droxian soldiers came at them with blinding speed, their energy weapons slicing through the air, while their automated drones buzzed overhead, picking off targets one by one. The humans moved with precision, their cloaking technology and AI-driven tactics allowing them to stay one step ahead. As they reached the heart of the flagship, the final stand began. The Droxian Eye had established an impenetrable defense around Emperor Vexar, but it was not enough. The humans fought with everything they had. There was no room for hesitation. The stakes were too high, and failure was not an option. The battle escalated into close-quarters combat, a deadly mix of human soldiers and Droxian forces locked in vicious hand-to-hand fights. Energy blades clashed, guns fired, and the sound of explosions echoed throughout the flagship's metal corridors. The orbital bombers above released a barrage of missiles, targeting key areas of the Droxian flagship. The sky above rumbled with the force of their destruction. The humans knew they had one shot at this. If they couldn't take out the Emperor's defenses, their mission would fail, and the war would be lost. But they pushed forward, refusing to back down. Commander Jake led his team through the chaos, his eyes locked on the final goal, Emperor Vexar. The Emperor had been the symbol of Droian dominance for centuries, the mastermind behind the galaxy's most oppressive regime. But Jake knew something the Droians had never understood. The true strength of humanity wasn't in its technology or its military might. It was in its will to survive, to fight for something greater than itself. The moment of truth came when Jake and his team finally breached the Emperor's inner sanctum. There, standing before them, was Vexar, a towering figure draped in dark robes, his face cold and unyielding. Behind him, the Droian AI pulsed with energy, its massive core whirring ominously. This was it, the final confrontation. "You are nothing," Vexar spat, his voice cold and cruel. "You have no idea what you are up against. You are fighting a war you cannot win. My eye has already calculated your every move. You are nothing but insects beneath my heel." Jake's eyes narrowed. He had heard these words before, but this time, they meant nothing. The Droian Emperor had ruled the galaxy through fear and manipulation, relying on his AI to control everything. But humanity had proven time and time again that it was capable of more than just following orders. It was capable of survival, of resistance, and of defying the odds. "You're wrong," Jake replied, his voice steady. "We're not here to follow orders. We're here to show you what true strength is." The final battle between Commander Jake and Emperor Vexar was nothing short of legendary. Their energy blades clashed, the sound ringing through the air. Jake's movements were fast, calculated, and precise, while Vexar's attacks were fueled by his eye's predictive algorithms, making him nearly impossible to defeat. But Jake's strength came from his determination, his belief in the humanity he was fighting for. Vexar relied on his eye, but Jake relied on something much more powerful: his team, his will, and his unshakable belief in the power of the human spirit. The battle was fierce, with both sides refusing to give an inch. Vexar summoned energy blasts, sending shockwaves through the room, but Jake dodged and countered with deadly precision. The Droian Emperor was strong, but Jake had something he didn't: the will to win. Finally, with a swift strike, Jake disarmed the Emperor, his blade slicing through the air to land a devastating blow. Vexar staggered back, shock and disbelief crossing his face. For the first time in his long reign, he realized that his empire was crumbling. He was no longer the unstoppable force he had once believed himself to be. The humans had proven him wrong. With one final, crushing blow, Jake defeated the Droian Emperor. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's true strength, the strength of people who refused to be controlled, who fought for their freedom and their future. The Droian Eye, the source of their empire's power, began to shut down, its core collapsing in on itself as the systems it controlled fell apart. Droian forces everywhere started to retreat, realizing their empire had fallen. The final victory came not just from the battle between Jake and Vexar, but from humanity's unwavering belief in its own power. Humans, though seemingly weak compared to the Droians and their AI, had shown that they were capable of adapting, fighting, and overcoming any challenge. This was the true strength of humanity: its will to survive, to stand up for what was right, and to never back down in the face of impossible odds. Jake looked out over the ruins of the flagship, the weight of the victory heavy on his shoulders. The galaxy had been forever changed. The Droians had underestimated humanity, and now they had paid the price. But Jake knew this victory would be the first of many. Humanity was no longer the underdog. It was a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never forget the name of the species that had brought down the Droian Empire. The war was over, but the fight for the future had just begun. And Commander Jake, standing amid the ruins of a fallen empire, was ready to lead humanity into the next chapter of their journey. The Droian Empire had crumbled. For centuries, the Empire had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, its AI-driven forces and overwhelming technology seemingly unstoppable. But the war was over now, and the mighty Empire was no more. The galaxy had witnessed an incredible transformation, one that was impossible to ignore. Humanity had proven that even the most advanced and oppressive forces in the universe could be brought down by the strength of a determined species. Now, in the aftermath of victory, humanity was faced with a new challenge. What would they do with their newfound power and freedom? Commander Jake stood among the wreckage of the Droxian flagship, the victory still fresh in his mind. It had been a long road, filled with countless battles, losses, and sacrifices. But it had all led to this moment, the collapse of the Droxian Empire and the dawn of a new era. For humanity, it was no longer about survival. It was about what came next. The galaxy had been changed forever, and humanity was now in a position to reshape its future. In the wake of the Droxian defeat, a power vacuum had emerged. The Droxian Eye, once the backbone of their empire, had been shattered. With it, the once impervious empire had fractured, and the galaxy was left in chaos. Planets that had once bowed to the Droxian overlords were now free, but they were unsure of how to move forward. Some planets had descended into anarchy, while others struggled to rebuild. There was no leader to unite them, no singular force to guide them through the rebuilding process. And that's where humanity came in. Humans, once seen as an underdog species, now found themselves in a position of power. They had defeated the Droxians, and with their AI-driven technology and military might, they had earned the respect of the galaxy. But humanity's new role wasn't just as conquerors. They were now the galaxy's protectors. The lessons they had learned through years of struggle had prepared them for this moment. No longer would they be the oppressed. Now they would be the ones to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. They would protect the weak, restore peace, and help the galaxy rebuild. The human empire began to expand, not through conquest, but through alliances and cooperation. Humanity had learned that their strength lay not in domination, but in the ability to adapt and work together. They reached out to former enemies and allies alike, offering them a place in this new era. The Droxian Empire had relied on fear and control, but humanity knew that lasting peace could only come through mutual respect and understanding. As humanity's influence spread, their colonies began to flourish. The futuristic cities they built were marvels of AI, robotics, and human ingenuity. Every colony became a testament to the perfect blend of technology and bravery. AI-driven machines worked alongside human workers, creating a society where technology wasn't just a tool for oppression, but a partner in progress. Robots took care of the menial tasks, while humans focused on exploration, discovery, and innovation. It was a vision of a perfect future, one where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. In the midst of this rapid change, Commander Jake found himself standing before a crowd of his fellow soldiers, civilians, and leaders. It was a moment he had never expected to come. The war was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the battle for the future was just beginning. As he stood on the podium, his heart swelled with pride and hope for what lay ahead. He had led his people through the darkest days, but now they were standing at the dawn of a new age, and it was up to them to shape that future.